All right, fantastic. I am so excited today to introduce our newest guest on the Secrets of Hiring podcast, Peter Renault. And Peter is the leader for talent acquisition for Cornerstone OnDemand. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you here. What's been interesting as I looked on your profile and your background, you've got, a wealth of knowledge in the TA space. You've been with Cornerstone a bit over 9 years, and then also with a search firm Experis for a few years as well. Maybe tell us a little bit about your current role, what you're focused on, and what's going on at Cornerstone OnDemand right now.
Yeah, definitely. I have been with Cornerstone, like you said, for 9 years. I kind of grew up here. I was an external recruiter at a company called Experis, like you mentioned. Cornerstone was actually my first client at Experis. They had just went public. I was placing a lot of people with them as an external recruiter, and got the opportunity about 9 years ago to join them internally as one of their first recruiters, and jumped on it. I was very excited. So my role has kind of grown here. Started off as a recruiter, and now I manage the recruiting team at Cornerstone, which is a global recruiting team. We have recruiters throughout the US, big team in India, and also a team in Europe as well.
Awesome. So great global reach. I know you guys are hiring right now. Checked out your career site. There's a lot of great roles all around the world, which is exciting. Peter, let me go a little bit personal on you for a second. One thing that I ask all the guests on the show is who their favorite band or artist is, just to give that human, essence to this podcast.
Yeah, that's a tough one for me because I can't say that I'm really a huge fan of any single artist. If you look at my Spotify playlist, it's all over the place. It goes from kid songs to country to rap and everything in between there. But I'd say recently I've been on a Michelle Branch kick.
Okay.
So I'm gonna go with Michelle Branch.
Michelle Branch. All right. Nobody has said that yet on
Yeah.
the show, so I like it.
There we go. Unique.
Yeah, it's good. All right. Well, Peter, as you know, we cover 3 areas. We want to talk about the secrets for candidates, for hiring managers, and for the recruiting team. So let's just jump right into the candidate side of the house. And what secrets would you want candidates to know to help them through the hiring process?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I'd start with is just the application process, right? That's shifted over the last year. We've seen some shifts in the market, and we're just seeing more candidates apply to positions. We've seen that at Cornerstone. So I guess the question you first have to ask is, how do you get your application in front of the right people? And there's a saying, I'm sure you know as a recruiter, right? Post and pray as a recruiter. It's not the best way to do it. I'd say the same thing goes right now for apply and pray. You don't just apply and hope that your resume gets to the front of the line. There's a lot of applicants, unfortunately, a lot of companies, their positions are kind of dark holes, and your resume won't get to the right person. So you got to find a way to get your name in front of the interviewer, the decision maker. So the first thing I'd say is really leverage your network. I'm hoping that everyone that listens here is already on LinkedIn. If you're not, make sure you join LinkedIn. But when you do apply for a company, do a search, and see if you know anyone that works there. And if you do reach out to them right now, you go on LinkedIn, you see all these people posting things about how I'm here to help and let me know if there's anything I can do. Actually, hold them to that, and reach out to them and ask if they can refer you. If they refer you, a lot of times that will get to, the front of the line, or make sure that the hiring manager sees the resume. Have them help you. They could get a referral bonus for it too, which incentivizes them to help you out even more. A lot of times they'll follow up with the recruiter to see where your resume is. So definitely lean on your network. And not even just people but when you go on LinkedIn too, do a search and see if you can find the hiring manager, the decision maker, and connect with them. I always think it's a really good idea to apply and then connect with the manager if you can figure out who the manager is or the decision maker. Send them a note, let them know you applied to the role, and with a brief summary of why you think you'd be a good fit for the position. It's a risk-free thing to do. I don't know anyone that's not gotten an interview, right, because they reached out to a hiring manager. So it could be the difference that lands you an interview and kind of gets you in front there. So I'd say that's a big thing.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think you're spot on. Like, the application process is super, super critical. And you're exactly right. As talent acquisition professionals, we see tons of people that will just apply to every single job under the sun. Mm-hmm. And those people are really doing themselves a disservice. because you'll see those candidates. You'll be like, oh, there's so-and-so again applying for the 50 jobs that we have open,
Exactly.
especially when they don't meet those qualifications. And I think it's just being realistic with yourself as an applicant too, and saying, okay, what skills and capabilities and experience do I truly have? And, apply for those roles, and maybe roles that might stretch a little bit from there. But if you stretch way too far, if all of a sudden you want to apply for a CEO role and you're just barely starting out your career, probably not the best use of your time to be applying to those type of roles that might be well out of the ballpark.
100%. And I don't think all candidates know this, but pretty much every applicant tracking system has some sort of a flagging mechanism, right? Where if you apply to 50 positions, it's not like that recruiter is going to think you just applied to that role. The ATS usually will notify you, hey, this person's also applied to this role and this role. And then as a recruiter, if you click into that and see, oh, this person's applied to every position, right? It looks like you're just a serial applier, and it's like, less likely that they'll respond to you to talk about the position. So that's a great point.
100%. Love it. Great.
The
Awesome.
other thing too that I'd say is really lean on the recruiter to help you get prepared for the interview. Recruiters aren't going to tell you, obviously the exact questions, but you can learn more about the interviewer, their style, what's important to them, and just other important information that recruiters can share. And I have some candidates that will ask me to prep them and some that don't. And you know that, if you're not asking your recruiter to prep, the recruiter should be doing that automatically, hopefully, but some that aren't automatically, they're only prepping people who are asking, and then you're at a disadvantage. So make sure you're asking your recruiter to get you ready for an interview. That's part of their job, and they should be happy to do it. The other thing too, just kind of moving on, is in the interview, try to be concise, but also make sure you cite a lot of specific examples of accomplishments that you've had that relate to that role. One of the most the most common feedback we get is that a candidate wasn't able to cite like specific examples in their responses. So try to be specific and detailed and concise. I know it's kind of hard to do, but that's really kind of the rope you need to walk there. And one thing that I always tell candidates during the interview process, and I know not all recruiters like this question, but I always encourage candidates at the end of the interview to ask, do you have any concerns about my background being a fit for the role? I just think it's sometimes an interviewer will be honest and they'll say, yeah, we were probably looking for someone who has more, B2B marketing skills or whatever it may be. And that just really gives the candidate, one last chance to explain that they do have that skill if maybe they didn't have the chance to do it in the interview. So it kind of gives you that one last, effort to justify anything that maybe you weren't able to get across in the interview.
I love especially what you're saying around specific examples, specific experiences, and being really concise about those. Communication is key. Like you've got 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour in an interview with a recruiter or a hiring manager. And, if you can't be specific and really get to the point, it's hard for a hiring manager or recruiter to say, yeah, I think this person is really great, when you can't quite follow where they're going if they're too verbose. So
Yeah. And
awesome.
it's same with your resume too. That's the way to think about it on your resume too. A lot of people just kind of copy the job description rather than copy the job description in your resume, right? Cite actual accomplishments and any kind of metrics or numbers that you can put on there. So I think that's another part of that too.
Awesome, Peter. Valuable advice. And thank you for providing so much great context. I think this will help our viewers significantly.
Of course, you're interviewing them too. So always make sure that you have questions to ask. Not only will give you more insight into the company, but good questions a lot of times are what really impresses interviewers. I can't tell you how many times I get feedback that says something like, they asked really insightful questions. And on the flip side, when they say the candidate had no questions, that's generally not a good thing, right? So
Yeah.
ask questions. Even if you asked someone in a round before, don't say, oh, I asked all my questions. Feel free to ask the manager again. They might have a different response, which can give you more insight into the company. But also it shows that, you put some thought into it too.
Yeah, I think that goes back to the skill that you talked about at the very beginning when we were introducing you, is just being curious, right? And a good way to show people that you're curious about the company is asking good questions. If you're
Mm-hmm.
not asking questions, that might show that you're not curious into
Yeah.
what's really happening behind the scenes in the
Yeah.
company.
And it's a good way to highlight your business acumen too, that you really understand kind of the business and the market, and you've done the research and everything too. So I think that's important.
Yeah, love that. Cool. All right, so similar question, but for hiring managers. You've worked with tons and tons of hiring managers. all around the globe, which I think is really, really interesting. Tell us, what secrets do you want hiring managers to know that will help them through the hiring process?
Yeah. I guess the first thing I would say is don't treat your recruiter like an order taker because you're not, then that's what you're going to get from them. Make sure that you partner with them. They'll be able to continue to refine the search. They should have market insight and be able to give you suggestions too on what they're seeing in the market. So I would say really partner with your recruiter. I'd also go back to the last thing that I just said about candidates, right? Which is that this is a two-way street. Candidates are interviewing us, we're interviewing them. So I always try to remind candidates that, or excuse me, managers that they need to sell the role in the company, just like the candidates trying to sell them, themselves to us. So make sure that you leave time for questions. And also, the way you start an interview is important. I mean, me and you kind of just chatted before we started this, right? And I think having that small talk, getting to know people, kind of puts people at ease, and
Yeah.
will just make the interview go a lot smoother. So take that time to don't just jump. We've had managers that just jump right into it. Introduce yourself, talk about your role at the company, put them at ease as much as you can. Candidates are nervous, especially ones that haven't interviewed in a long time, which is kind of what we're seeing in this market right now. So do that. Skills-based interviewing is another thing that I think is really important, and something that's kind of a little bit of a newer kind of mindset. Which is it's more around now finding the right skill set, finding someone that can do the job effectively, and not necessarily someone with that traditional background or the same exact background of you. Maybe you don't need someone that went to your same school, had the same major that you had, worked at a FANG company, and kind of worked their way up that way. Maybe someone could have developed the right skills through a different route. I think of like coding boot camps, for example. Um, you know, if people are able to go to coding boot camps and get the right actual knowledge in these programming languages that you're using, is that someone that you could hire? And if not, why? We started at Cornerstone using skills assessments. We used it was a coding assessment that we would send out, and
Yeah.
we ended up finding out that we were hiring some really good candidates that we would have passed on before we started using that, because they didn't have that traditional background that we looked at for. And so that really kind of opened our eyes that people can learn on their own. They can learn at boot camps, night school, whatever it may be. So skills-based interviewing and hiring, I think, is really important too.
Yeah.
One other thing too, I guess I would say, and this is something that we're talking about a lot right now, is go into the interview with a fresh and open mind. And what I mean by that, is ideally you don't get the rating from a previous interviewer. You should know what the last interviewer covered, what you're going to cover. That they obviously cleared the last round of interviews since they're meeting with you. But I do think it's really important not to get the score and their detailed feedback, because I think it can really sway you as a hiring manager or an interviewer. We went through this change at Cornerstone, and it's pretty eye opening, where we used to have a tech interview, and then the managers would meet with the group of managers coming in next and share their feedback. And it was always the same. If they liked him, the next group liked him. If they didn't like him, the next group didn't like him. When we stopped doing that, we saw that there was really some differences in the rounds, and it allowed us to find people that we might have passed on because the first group didn't like him and share the feedback with the second group. So I think that's important. And then the very last thing, I know we're looking to move on here, but is give good feedback to your recruiter. I think, I talked about that before with being a partner, but you've got to, if you don't like a candidate or a candidate didn't work out, make sure you give the feedback of the why to the recruiter. Don't just say pass, because this will obviously allow them to fine tune their search and, adjust the questions that they ask in the first round.
Yeah, I really like what you talked about at the very beginning, and then how you closed out here. It's really that partnership. Being a partner with your recruiter and hiring manager is absolutely vital. And I've built some of the best relationships ever with hiring managers, as their recruiter, that are going to be forever relationships, forever friendships that I've experienced. But those are the people that do want to partner, and it's not the order taking, and it is providing that great feedback like you're talking about, and that can make all the difference in the world. So yeah, I appreciate the insights that you shared.
Cool.
All right. The last group, which should be very near and dear to your heart, is the recruiting team. And share with us a little bit more about what you'd want them to know, as they support candidates and hiring managers through the recruiting process. Any
Yeah.
recruiting teams out there in the world?
I mean, I guess the first thing is, we talked about this earlier. The market has shifted, right? People are a little stressed right now in this market. Some people are looking for jobs that maybe haven't looked for jobs, recently. And so this whole thing is stressful. So the first thing, I think recruiters, for the most part, do a really good job with this. Be nice and be helpful when you can. And I know, we can't talk to every person that applies. We sometimes get, 1,000 applicants in a day, but hopefully you have an ATS system and a process where if you do pass on someone's resume, your ATS system will at least let them know. And if you do talk to someone and they interview and you pass at any stage in the interview, I think it's really important to call them and give them feedback as to why we passed, because it can be really helpful for their job search. And candidates always really appreciate the honesty when you tell them why we pass. Whenever I call people and tell them, they're always very impressed. They're like, well, it's not often that someone calls me and gives me the actual feedback as to why. So I'd say that that's really important. Again, I do think that recruiters for the most part try to be helpful and nice as much as they can, but just a kind of reminder there. And then the other thing I mentioned above too, right? Make sure you're prepping your candidates and your hiring managers. We want our candidates to go into these prepared. They should know the basic things at least, right? Who they're meeting with, the type of interview it's going to be. Is it going to be a technical interview? Will this person be asked to share their portfolio? Making sure that they're prepared for that. And what tools they'll need for the interview. Is it going to be a coding thing? Will they need to download something? Make sure you get them all prepared. And then of course, give them any advice that you can, on the interview or in the interview process. The other thing too is, and this is something that we've been working on a lot at Cornerstone, making sure that our managers are prepared. And what we're doing is, and I think a lot of companies are doing this, especially now with pay transparency and some things that are going on, right, is making sure you have like a standardized interview guide and assessment tool, to make sure that managers are asking the same questions to the same candidates and that they're having effective interviews, making sure that they're focused on the right things that they need to be focused on, interviewing for the right competencies, the right skills, etc. Another thing too that our team does that I love when our recruiters do this, is they ask hiring managers if they can sit in on their interviews. It's kind of awkward. A lot of managers don't like it. A lot of recruiters don't like to ask, but we have some recruiters at Cornerstone that love doing that. And it's a chance to first allow you to give like feedback and coaching to the managers on the interview. But also it gives you even like a better understanding of what the manager is looking for. It helps them better screen candidates, I think, going forward.
You can definitely, listening to what you're saying and just hearing the tone of your voice, Peter, like I can tell that you're a fantastic talent acquisition leader, very buttoned up, very process oriented, experience oriented, and all the things that you just mentioned are all the great best practices that talent acquisition teams should do. So I really appreciate that. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, cool. Well, I have one final question for you, and this is more just personal. For you, I'd really love to know what you feel like is your biggest superpower that has helped fuel and shape your career.
Yeah, I'd say, I don't know if you consider this a superpower, but I think I'm a connector, and I think recruiters for the most part are like this, right? Able to connect, and find similarities with different groups of people, and really able to kind of forge those type bonds, like you said, that you've done with your hiring managers. I think that's what makes a successful recruiter, someone who's just likes to connect with people, meet new people, learn new things, make new friends, and kind of forge those relationships like you talked about with managers and with candidates. I think that is the most important thing that you can do as a recruiter.
Awesome. Well, hey, this has been probably one of my favorite interviews. And I know we were, this was kind of a spur of the moment. You jumped on at the last second to help us do this podcast today. And I'm really glad that you did, because I think the insight that people will learn from the different things that you've said are game changing. So I really appreciate that. I know, Peter, you guys are hiring right now. For anybody that's looking for roles at Cornerstone OnDemand, where's the best place for them to go to find careers?
Yeah, totally. We are hiring. We're hiring around the globe, India, Europe, and the US, like I said before, where our recruiting teams sit. You can go to our website. It's www.csod.com/careers. And there you'll be able to find all of our positions. Or I always tell people, you can make a job alert. If there's a role that you're interested in at Cornerstone, you can make a profile and say, when this type of role opens up, let me know. And that way you get alerted right away and you can apply. You should actually do that too for all companies that you're interested in. Go on their site. Pretty much every career site will allow you to do this and make a job alert, so you're alerted when a position opens up that you're interested in.
Awesome. Love it. Great. Well, hey, thanks so much for spending some time with us today, and hope to chat with you again soon.
Cool. Thanks, Jeremy.
It was great to have Peter Renault on the podcast today. He's a fantastic talent acquisition leader. I learned a lot. I hope you learned a lot. There's definitely a lot of secrets to the hiring process, and we want to make sure that you have every advantage to help you, whether you're a candidate, a hiring manager, part of the recruiting team. Please subscribe to the channel if you've liked it, and if you enjoyed what you saw, smash that like button, leave a comment, let me know what you'd like to hear more of, and check out one of my other videos.